Deal with your haters by naming your wagon party after them. Sorry, you got diphtheria and died, Janice. And then you die of dysentery. Lessons in Adulting from the Oregon Trail. Fantastic book for the bathroom. Well, good evening, everybody. It's Chris here from Let's Stop Cafe in Mirror, Alberta. What a fantastic day it's been. Absolutely wonderful. This morning, I got to spend lots of time on social media, reading lots of cool things, realizing how energized and involved people are in politics right now. I got to watch some people who I would have never thought cared about rights and freedoms start screaming through their keyboard about rights and freedoms. And later on, I found out that the Lukasik Forever Canadian petition was successful in that he appears to have gotten over 450,000 people sign his petition to put a referendum question to the people of Alberta that says, do you agree that Alberta should remain in Canada? And of course, we're going to answer no, because why would anybody answer yes? If Alberta was already an independent nation and Canada came knocking and asked if we would join Confederation under the current terms and conditions, what would you say? That's right, you'd say no, because it is a terrible, terrible deal. First off, I kind of want to know if you can hear me, so maybe just put up a comment quick. I guess if you haven't been able to hear me, you would have said something by now. This morning, I alluded to some stuff I wanted to talk to you about, or information I wanted to share about the current situation with Alberta education and the teachers' strike that is now ended, and so on. So here's my theory. And please comment whether or not you agree with this, or you have the same ideas or opinions, or maybe you don't, and comment as to why either way. My theory is this. This strike, strike in the teacher strike, is not so much about the teachers or the students. Instead, it is a political move by the ATA and the NDP working in an unholy alliance in order to reduce support for the United Conservative Party government and Danielle Smith and topple the government. That's my theory. And if you look on social media and you consider, let's just agree with me for a moment and think that's true. If you look on social media, it's working. You're seeing tons of conservatives, tons of United Conservative Party members saying things like, I'm burning my membership, I'll never vote for you again, how could I have been so stupid? All those types of things. The support for our United Conservative Party government and for the Premier is under attack. Am I wrong there? No, I'm not. So what's happened is the province, the TEBA, on behalf of the province, has been negotiating an agreement with the Alberta Teachers Association for some things. Now, what they're saying publicly and what they're telling students and parents and that type of thing is they're fighting for children. They're fighting for better education for kids, for more resources for kids, for more teachers for classrooms, better supports, that type of thing. They keep failing to mention that they're asking for more money. Alberta teachers, and you can fact check this, please do. Alberta teachers are paid more than any other province in this country. Fact. They also have the lowest taxes. Actually, hold on. I think maybe Northwest Territories and none of it. have a little bit higher salary, but our teachers are paid the most. They get 90 paid sick days, up to 90 paid sick days per year. The utilization for that pre-COVID was about 6 to 8 days per year that each teacher took as paid sick days. After COVID, that number went up by 50% to 9 to 11 sick days per year. In addition, around the same time, it was mandated that teachers must be jabbed. Now, I'm not saying what caused this, but the temporal correlation between these two events suggests that something happened over that period of time that made teachers, on average, 50% sicker. I'm not going to guess as to what caused that. We've been having a little bit of trouble in our schools in Alberta for probably the better part of 8 or 9 years. Our government generally looks at things like, projected immigration, projected birth rates, what demographics are doing, who's moving, who's going, who's doing this. And they try and allocate tax dollars to things like education. Since 2018, the immigration coming into Alberta, or let's just talk about overall population increase, has been way, way more than what the province predicted. I have it over here. Population growth, 2018, plus 58,000 people total. And I can't remember exactly, but I think it worked out to about 30% kids in school age, but don't quote me on that. You'll have to check for yourself. 2019 plus 19,000. 2020 plus 20,000. 2021 minus 28,000 people. 2022 plus 60,000. Alberta's calling. Alberta is the freest province in Canada. Alberta is the place to be. 2022 plus 60,000. 2023 plus 202,000. 2024 plus 168,000. That is the highest population growth in Canada because Alberta is the place to be. So if you're government and you're trying to project and predict where to spend tax dollars going forward, you would have a very difficult time with those numbers. Anyhow, let's move on. So we have some problems in our schools. The teachers are citing understaffed, underpaid. They're citing classroom complexity and behavioral issues. And that's partly parents' fault because we don't spank our children anymore. That's not true. I would spank my children. I did spank my children when they needed it. And so should you, or you should have. They have behavioral issues and the such. Now, when they talk about complexity in the classroom, a lot of times what they're meaning is kids with disabilities, or perhaps kids with language barriers. Now, there are a lot of kids that English is not their first language that have come into our schools in the last 4 or 5 years, way more than was anticipated. In addition to that, back in 2016, better fact check this one. Back around 2016, the NDP changed the pilot program of inclusive learning to permanent and put all of the kids with behavioral complexities into classrooms with kids that did not have behavioral complexities, and disabled kids that needed extra support. The idea was inclusivity, but what inclusivity did was it just changed the outcome. It created an equality of outcome instead of an equality for opportunity. That was a mistake, and we see that now. So yes, there are behavioral issues that teachers have to deal with. And yes, there are just bad behaved children because parents don't spank their kids anymore. So this has reached a boiling point. It's resulted in Alberta having the lowest funding per student in Canada. And that comes in around $13,000 per student. Now, on a little side note here, I want to point out that while our classrooms are overcrowded, teachers are overworked, the superintendents of probably your school district, specifically I'm talking about the school district here, have been traveling abroad to different countries to try and recruit international students to come and study in Alberta. Now, these are, kind of mostly high school kids. The idea is diversity is our strength. The reality is these superintendents are spending each tens of thousands of dollars bringing students from abroad into already overcrowded classrooms. And they're doing it because they're picking the cream of the crop from other countries so that our average scores go up in this province, because our average scores have been going down. How many of you have heard children say, oh, they put me in the whatever class because I couldn't keep my grades up? They're lowering the bar so that it appears that our children are meeting the bar. They're bringing in kids that are whiz kids so that increases the overall statistics. But what do I know? I'm just a burger flipper. Anyhow, these superintendents of these school boards are doing this. I've found trips to Tokyo, Milan, Germany, Australia, Italy, France, superintendents in your school districts jet setting to attract international students. In addition to that, these superintendents have around an office expense of around $70,000 on top of their $250 or so thousand a year salary. It's important that school boards get audited, because the amount of money that's getting spent is absolutely unreal. Like, they're seriously expensing lattes and a 9-kilometer drive across Edmonton to go and visit a school. So that's the little sidebar there. Oh, and they are specifically expensing their union dues, which are around $1,400 per superintendent. They're not paying it themselves. It's coming directly out of the fund. Regular teachers, they don't have that luxury. They pay their dues out of their own pocket. Superintendents and their office do not. They're also going and spending tens of thousands of dollars a year taking $3,000 a pop CEO training courses and seminars, complete with the spa treatment, of course, because of course. Anyhow, so we have this situation where children, or the kids, Alberta has the lowest funding per child in Canada. What does that mean? Well, it means that maybe the kids aren't getting the support they need. It means that teachers are overworked. Yes, that's 100% true. I wouldn't want that job. You got to love kids a lot and have a lot of patience to be a teacher, especially considering the behavioral complexities they have to deal with on a daily basis. So our funding is low. Our school boards are spending money like it's free, and assets aren't being utilized properly. One of the points that the ATA made on behalf of teachers in the bargaining was that class sizes were too high. They cite classes with 47 children in them at times. Now, I want to point out that it appears, at least to me, and I've looked into this a little bit, that these classes are in the cities. And the cities are generally where more migration comes, because that's the place to be. So these classrooms are becoming overcrowded. If you look at the numbers, the Alberta Teachers Association membership is roughly 51,000 members. Of those members, approximately 32,000 are full-time or part-time teachers. That is not including educational assistants. There are 825,000-ish kids in school in Alberta. That includes all the schools except for independent and charter schools. That puts average class size right around 23 or 24 kids per classroom. If everything was perfect and the average applied in every classroom across Alberta, that would be fine, 23 kids in a class, but it's not. The numbers are skewed because in some places, there's 47 children in a class, mostly in the cities. In other places, even sometimes just outside of the cities, there are schools that have such low utilization that they're being considered for closure. There are schools east of Edmonton that have 10 children per classroom with one teacher and an EA. That's too low. We need more kids in those seats, possibly some of those 47. So that's another problem. Now, the The province uses a third-party independent corporation to do the bargaining on behalf of the province. It's called the TEBA. They do the negotiations with the ATA. You can check this out if you want. I've actually got it up on this other screen. And in September, they reached a tentative agreement. And the agreement was something like this. It was, I just had it up. It was a 12% salary increase over 4 years, which isn't a huge number. It barely covers inflation, but please remember that Alberta is one of the lowest tax jurisdictions in the country, and Alberta teachers are already amongst the highest paid. Not saying they don't deserve it, I'm just telling you the numbers. The 12% salary increase over 4 years has an additional up to 17% market adjustments for most teachers. I don't know exactly what that means, but I'm assuming that teachers that live in areas where it's much more expensive to live may see a different increase, but you'll have to look into that yourself. Maybe there's a teacher that can fill us in on that. Hiring 3,000 teachers and 1,500 educational assistants, $8.6 billion to build or modernize 130 schools across Alberta. Now, they're including that in the bargaining. However, I want to point out that that was agreed to before, because the current government realized how fast the province is growing, and they put out a massive infrastructure plan late last year, which also got them in hot water with Conservatives because they said they weren't being fiscally responsible. But really what they were doing is planning for the future. $55 million to address classroom complexities. That is a 20% increase from last year. A task force on class size and complexity, with public data being transparent and released. An update on the 2004 special ed standards, which means that the province has identified that it has created problems by putting kids that have behavioral issues or learning disabilities in classrooms with other children, and it's hard on the kids and the teachers. So they're looking at fixing that. And they're going to act on aggression and complexity. So kids that are aggressive towards teachers, we've heard of kids spitting on teachers, swearing at them, hitting them, all those sorts of things. They should literally be drugged down the hall by their ears, like I was, and sat in the principal's office until their parents could pick them up and then whoop their ass later on that evening. Behavioral issue solved. So these things were all presented to the ATA, and the ATA accepted tentatively. They came back a little while later and they said, we're not going to have an agreement unless you include free COVID-19 boosters for teachers. And the government probably was like, what the is wrong with these people? Why would they want to harm teachers? I thought they were trying to help them. Why would they give them an experimental medical intervention that they don't need as part of a collective bargaining agreement? But alas, they said, you know what? Fill your boots. If you want the clot shots, I guess you can take them. And it's a good thing you have the 90 sick days. So TEBA brought that to the provincial government. The provincial government said, okay, sure. Yeah, no problem. They went back to them again. The ATA said, no, actually now we want another $2 billion of funding. And there were some other things in there that I can't seem to get information on. It's all hidden in the bargaining agreement. They're very tight-lipped on those things, and it's sealed. You can't get them out. You can't get the information except with a subpoena. But there's things in there that they call inflexible provisions, things that just aren't going to work and the government can't do. And that's what stalled negotiations. It wasn't any of the things that the ATA is telling teachers and students. The government was more than willing to work on those things. And full disclosure, I don't think the government's perfect. I think they're complete effing boneheads sometimes, but in this case, I think they're on the right track and they're legitimately trying to do the right thing. The ATA wanted $2 billion more. Actually, hold on a second. Let me back up. When the ATA went back to the teachers and told them that they got COVID boosters included in the bargaining, there were teachers that spoke out and said, we never asked for that. We don't want that. Why are you asking on our behalf? Just thought I'd throw that out there. So negotiations stalled, even though the province agreed with the ATA that they needed the supports that were included in the original bargaining. And here we are today. So what's happened is the province, via TEBA and the ATA, came to an impasse. They were unable to reach an agreement. Meanwhile, kids have been out of school for 1 month. The teachers have done their strike. They've made their point. The ATA has made their point. They got some muscles to flex. They got their friend Gil fingering everybody again. And we all know that something has to be done and we have to fix this. But they still won't go back to the classroom, and kids are suffering. Now out come the big guns from the government. The last option, and I say the last option because that's reality. There are people out there that say that this option I'm about to describe wasn't necessary, that they could have done something first. Bullshit. This was the last option. The option they used was legislation forcing the teachers back to work, back to the classrooms, so the kids can learn and not continue to be political fodder. That's what they're doing. They're treating children as political fodder. They don't care about the kids. They care about their revenue. So the government legislated them back to work. The ATA said, well, we'll sue you. You can't do that. It's unconstitutional because we have a constitutional right to association. And the government said, yes, but we also have a notwithstanding clause that can override that for a period of 5 years to provide stability in education so kids can get educated while we're working on these problems together. So they threatened to use the notwithstanding clause. Now, at this point, it would be completely, am I allowed to use the word retarded? It would be completely silly for the ATA to bother suing over this because they know they're going to pull out the notwithstanding clause, which is the nuclear option in this instance. It really is. But for those of you that say it is unconstitutional, it is absolutely constitutional, 100%. The notwithstanding clause is part of our Constitution. It is a tool that governments have that they can use in these instances for these purposes. And it's not without its peril, because the citizens looking at this from the outside looking in, they see that as overreach, heavy-handed, stripping away rights and freedoms. And it causes even the staunchest of conservatives, of supporters of our current government, to reconsider their support because they believe their government is acting in a tyrannical manner. Now, it feels that way to me as well. But if you look at it from the perspective of what's best for the kids, it was the right option. And I can tell you right now that there have been superintendents and teachers reaching out to people who are holding levers of power and begging them to do this because they want to get back to work. These people are members of the Alberta Teachers Association or the Association of Superintendents or whatever it's called. They can't speak out because if they did, their bargaining group, their union, would destroy them. Why would they destroy them and how could they destroy them? Because they're also the regulatory body. They're also the professional association. The Alberta Teachers Association is not just the teachers union. They're the entity that teachers have to get their license from. And if the ATA doesn't like what the teacher's doing for whatever grounds, they can revoke their license and they can't teach. So these people are terrified to speak out. Absolutely terrified. But they are speaking out. They're speaking out to people like me and people like Berta Proud Dad. And they're going to the news, wanting to remain anonymous because they love teaching and they want to keep their jobs, but they need people to know that they don't support this. That is a very, very big problem. We have a very big problem. Remember what I said? My theory is that the NDP is in bed in some unholy alliance with the Alberta Teachers Association, and they're using Alberta education as a means by which to topple the current government and gain power for the NDP. I guarantee you, somewhere out there, somebody knows of a conversation that was had between these two groups, agreeing to a quid pro quo, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours agreement. Think about it. Even conservatives right now are lashing out at Danielle Smith. And here's another little sidebar. I want to point something out. Smith is getting absolutely lambasted on social media right now because of this. But this isn't just a Danielle Smith thing. Danielle Smith has a team around her that supports her. She has a team that she listens to, and they made this decision together. This wasn't just a Danielle Smith decision. But what Danielle Smith has had to do is she's had to be the one that sticks her head out and has rotten tomatoes thrown at her. Every time. Every time Danielle Smith listens to her team and makes a decision for the best of Albertans, as best as they can, she is the one that bears the full force of the attack. She's done it numerous times. And that lady still stands tall and holds to her principles. She supports the people that made the decisions with her. And I got to say, there are very few people that can handle that kind of attack as gracefully as she does. So well done. Now here we are. Kids are going to go back to school. Teachers are going to go back teaching. They're going to start getting paid again. And the province is in a complete uproar over the use of legislation to put people back to work. They're claiming that it's an infringement of rights and freedoms. How dare they? Well, I'd like to agree. It is a temporary infringement of the right to... Actually, no. Nowhere in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms does it say we have a right to strike. It says we have freedom of association. Teachers are still free to associate with whoever they choose. And yes, the Supreme Court did rule that the right to strike is covered under freedom of association. So there is that. But that was the federal Supreme Court. I don't want any business with the federal Supreme Court. I want our matters dealt with in Alberta. So what do we do to shield ourselves from federal law that interferes with the way Alberta wants to do business? We use the notwithstanding clause. That's what that's for. Not to strip rights away from teachers. It's to shield from the federal government. The teachers did strike. They did make their point. But at some point, you have to do what's best for the kids and get back to class. And that's why the government made this decision. Not an easy decision, because they knew this was going to happen. And there's some of you right now, I'm sure you're screaming, Ontario did this. Ontario used the notwithstanding clause, and look how it turned out for them. 4 days later, it was overturned. Yes, Ontario did use the notwithstanding clause in a labor dispute with, oh boy, was it education? I think it was education. But there's a big difference. They used it before the teachers, or I'm pretty sure it was teachers, before they went on strike. They used it preemptively. And on top of that, at that time, the average wage for that group was $39,000 per year. And Doug Ford offered a $1 per hour raise and legislated them back to work and used the notwithstanding clause. That is a big difference. Our government, TEBA, on behalf of our provincial government, went to the negotiating table in good faith. And they tried to hammer out a deal. They exhausted other avenues, and it didn't work. And the last resort was legislate them back to work, having to use a notwithstanding clause because they knew that the Supreme Court would try and strike it down. That's what had to be done. Now, I mentioned the word good faith. I want to point out that the ATA has not been bargaining in good faith, in my opinion. They have been telling parents and teachers things like the TEBA can't negotiate things like class caps or class sizes. That is an outright lie. They were busted on this. Nate Horner made a comment on it, I believe. They were busted on lying to students and teachers about what could be done and how the bargaining would go. They didn't bother to tell teachers and students that they were given everything they asked for, except for the last $2 billion that was unreasonable and just not able to happen. They gave them everything else. Oh, I heard it. Somebody just said 3,000 teachers. That's only one teacher per school. Correct, if your math is like that. But you forget the other part of what the province offered. Task Force on Class Size and Complexity will release public data. The opposition has been screaming for years that the government isn't reporting class sizes. Now the government's saying, okay, let's report the class sizes. And the reason they want to do that is because when you hire 3,000 more teachers, how do you know where you're going to put them? Are you just going to put them evenly, one in each school? No, you're going to put them where they're needed. There's schools out there that don't need any more teachers. They have enough. And then there's schools that need more. So they're going to go where they're needed. So it's not one per school. Say there's 10% of schools. Let's say 20% of schools have 47 kids in their class and they need more. We're going to spread those 3,000 teachers over those schools. We're going to spread those 1,500 EAs over the schools that need them, not the ones that don't. So when people say on the internet, oh, that's only 20 minutes per class extra that the teachers are going to get. No, that's not how it works. The government wants to do it right. Conservatives don't just throw spaghetti or money at the wall to see what sticks. They look at the problem, they decide how they're going to tackle the solution or tackle it in the most efficient way possible, and then they do it. In this case, they're going to look at the class sizes, look who needs the teachers, and then put them there. And we're building how many new schools? 130 new schools. So class sizes will drop across Alberta. And, this isn't all our provincial government's fault. Why did we have 202,000 people move to Alberta in 2023 and 168,000 in 2024? Over the period of 2018 to 2024, 30% of all immigration to Canada came to Alberta. 30%. That's a lot of people. And that was completely overwhelming for not only our education, but also our hospitals, our services, our housing, all of these things. The Premier understood this when she released her infrastructure budget, saying Alberta's going to start building because we're going to grow. And even some conservatives attacked her saying, oh, you're saying you're going to double the population? What are you talking about? You're a WF plant. No, she identified that this is occurring and made a plan to fix it and then got shit on for it. Completely unfair. So this is my message to any of you out there who had an emotional response to this and have decided that you're no longer going to support our government or our premier because of this. Give your head a shake. You are being used and manipulated by the opposition, by Naheed Nenshi, in order to topple this government so that they can get power. Plain and simple. And when they do, if you don't smarten up, you'll have nobody to blame but yourself. When they do, if you don't smarten up, they will reward the ATA handsomely with your tax dollars. And I guarantee you, they're not going to use a task force to find out where the money needs to go. They're going to throw it at the wall, and they're going to let all of their loyal supporters who did their dirty work reap the benefits for it. And you as a taxpayer are going to foot the bill. And you as a student, you're going to pay the price. So you have a decision to make. Are you going to use your head and understand that this is not about the teachers or the students? This is not about improving Alberta education. This is a power grab, a coordinated attack by the unions and their buddy NDP to gain power and money. On another note, if the NDP take power, they will end funding for independent schools. Independent schools save taxpayers money. Independent schools, the kids receive 75% of the funding of their counterparts in the public school system. So if the public school kid gets 13,000, the independent school kid gets 8 or something like that. It saves the taxpayer a considerable amount of money. It also gives parents a choice whether or not they're going to put their kid in a school that promotes the frickin' woke mind virus, progressive ideology that confuses kids and causes them mental anguish, or if they're going to put them in an independent or charter school that aligns with their beliefs and values so that their kids can be raised in an environment that promotes learning over ideology. They will end that. And actually, they did that last time. They ended that. Our premier, though not perfect, is not afraid to stick her neck out and do the right thing when required. She took the full force of the attack when she pulled pornographic, deviant books out of our libraries so our children didn't have that. Books that we couldn't show on the news, we couldn't show on TV because they were too pornographic. She pulled them out and said, no, age appropriate only, you grooming pedophiles. She took the attack for that as a book burner. And very few people stood up for her. She took the full force of the attack from the left, from the progressive woke left, when she said, no, we're not going to sacrifice children to the woke mind virus anymore. We're going to make sure that children aren't making adult decisions until they're adults. We're going to protect them from the ideological activists that wish to change reality by making children participate in it so that they feel more real. She took the attack for that. And now she's taking the attack for this as well. And what she's doing and what cabinet's doing, what this government is doing, is they're standing up for the kids. If they had gone and done a Dougie Ford thing and legislated back to work and used the notwithstanding clause without negotiating before the teachers had gone on strike or anything like that, and offered them a pittance of $1 an hour pay raise, I would have been furious. But they didn't do that. They did their due diligence. They tried. Negotiations haven't been successful. Now it's time to get back to school. And I can't believe I actually have to point out the irony in this situation of the union screaming about charter rights after they sacrificed their members to the COVID mandates and restrictions, didn't stand up for them when they were being forced to take a medical intervention they didn't want, and completely ignored their right to mobility, life, liberty, and security, expression, all sorts of things. Completely ignored it when it was politically convenient for them. Unreal. Do you know what happens when a teacher goes to court and claims that their charter rights have been violated? The court defers to the union. You're a member of a union. It's your union's job to advocate for you, not the court. That occurred thousands of times during the pandemic when teachers tried to fight for their rights. And do you know how many of their unions stuck up for their rights? 0 that I know of. Not one. They didn't give a shit about their members' rights then. They don't give a shit about their members' rights now. They care about revenue. Period. If this attack on our government is successful and the NDP win office next term, independent schools will be defunded, and 7,100 teachers will be left either jobless or forced to become a member of the Alberta Teachers Association and work in the public school system. 7,100 teachers joining the Alberta Teachers Association equals $9.2 million in extra revenue for the Alberta Teachers Association. That is a pretty big reward for helping the NDP take down the government. Don't you think? Now ask yourself, is that good for students or parents or teachers? It's not. Anyhow, I think that's it. I hope this was informative. If you have anything to say on this, please post it in the comments. Please. If I've got anything wrong and you have information and you can back that up, let me know. I want to get it right. And I also want to make sure that you know that a lot of this is my opinions. I am forming my opinions on what I see, what I've read, and sometimes what I feel. And if you disagree with me, you're welcome to post something in the comments and let me know. I always want to learn. And I think if we bother to take the time to learn about these things, we can actually do it right. If we bother to learn things like, what the government is doing, how they're actually trying to get things done properly, then we can make a proper decision to support them. Instead of just sitting here on our computer screens screaming that they're stripping away rights when they're really not. Those teachers still have the freedom of association. Actually, they don't. We might need to start a petition. Our teachers are being tyrannized by the government right now. There is legislation that exists today that compels our teachers to be a part of an organization or a society that they may not wish to be. That organization is the Alberta Teachers Association. I think our teachers should have the right and the freedom to associate freely with whom they please. Same with our nurses. Same with our doctors. Same with our lawyers. I think we need a petition to split the regulatory bodies from the unions. And then we need more legislation to allow teachers to associate with whichever professional association they choose. Wouldn't that be wonderful if our teachers had their rights back? Have a great night, everyone. See you tomorrow. Teachers should have choice.
Meow.